Hi everybody, I'm Marco Martini from the Sport Science Department of FC Internazionale Milano, and with this presentation I will try to give you an overview of the physical fitness tests we perform with the athletes in our club. Before going in deep into the physical fitness tests, let me give you some information about the Sport Science Department of our club, which was created in September 2022. Our head is Roberto Sassi, and we operate in two main sites. The first one is the Senior Male First Team Training Center in Appiano Gentile, where me, Lara Tomasini and Matteo Nelli work. And the second one is sited in Milan and is the training center of youth and female teams, and Stefano Savasto and Matteo Ferrari work there. The support we give to male and female teams is different depending on the age group. We create daily reports for training and match analysis, but we also perform weekly and monthly analysis on specific training load topics. We also perform physical fitness tests with all of our teams, from under 9 to senior teams. And with some teams, we also give an on-field support. So we go on the pitch and we give support to the coaching staff during specific drills. And these teams are the senior teams, male under 20 and under 18, and women under 19. When testing football players, we have three main aims. The first one is related to performance. So we want to give coaching staff information in order to optimize physical fitness of players to help them in performing better. Then we have a long-term aim related to the development of our players. So we want to track their physical qualities from when they are in the youth teams to the senior teams. And of course, during all the journey of players in our club, we want to help the coaching staff in the injury prevention process. The physical fitness tests we perform are based on the physiological needs of match physical performance. So we measure aerobic capacity using the Mognoni's test. Then we measure intermittent running capacity using the HIT test. Regarding neuromuscular qualities, we measure lower limbs power using the counter move and jump test, sprint abilities of players using a 30 meters sprint test, and lastly we measure muscular endurance using the peripheral neuromuscular fatigue test, that is a repeated changes of direction test. We perform these physical fitness tests at multiple time points during the season in order to track changes in the physical qualities of players during the season. So let's start with the first test, that is the test Mognoni for the aerobic capacity. The Mognoni's test consists of 6 minutes of running at a constant speed of 13.5 km per hour for male and 12.5 km per hour for female. So at a quite slow speed. Players run around the pitch following an audio signal in order to maintain the constant speed. As you can see from the video below, at the end of the test we collect a blood sample from the earlobe in order to measure lactate accumulation, where a lower lactate accumulation means a better result in the test. We also collect perception of the effort and heart rate at the end of the test. So this is a submaximal running test where we measure the physiological response to a standardized exercise. Since soccer is an intermittent sport, we also want to measure intermittent running capacity, and we do that using the HIT test. The HIT test lasts 5 minutes and it consists of runs of 10 seconds with 20 seconds of recovery. The runs are performed at 18 km per hour for males and 17 km per hour for females over a 25 plus 25 meter course with an 180 degrees change of direction. Again, this test is submaximal, so we measure physiological response to a standardized submaximal exercise. Similarly to the test Mognoni, at the end of the test we collect blood lactate accumulation, perception of the effort, and heart rate. Identify metabolic qualities of players. We plot the lactate accumulation at the end of the test on the horizontal axis, with the lactate accumulation at the end of the HIT test on the vertical axis. In this way, we can identify qualities of players. In the top right corner, we find players with high aerobic and intermittent running capacity, while on the opposite side of the graph, in the low left corner, we find players with low aerobic and intermittent running capacity. In this way, we give information to the coaching staff in order to individualize the training session. Here you can see a very simple report we give at the end of a training session. In this case, it represents a running drill. We have three groups of players performing different running drills. The first group performed an intermittent exercise over 50 meters of 20 seconds of work with 20 seconds of recovery. The second group performed a longer intermittent exercise over 75 meters with 15 seconds of work with 15 seconds of recovery, while the last group performed a continuous running exercise. And these three groups were created by the physical coach using the information obtained with the fitness test. Moving to strength and power testing. The first test we perform is the counter movement jump test. We use a force platform, and so we are able to measure jump height, but also force and power expressed during the jump. This force platform in particular allows us also to obtain information about the force and power of the two lower limbs separately, giving us also information about lower limb imbalances. Following the counter movement jump test, players perform the 30 meters sprint test. We use a radar gun to measure the speed of the player over the entire 30-meter course. Using the method proposed by Moran, we extrapolate the force velocity profile to obtain three main variables. The first one is the maximal theoretical acceleration, F0, that is very related to the ability of players to accelerate in the first meters of the sprint. Then we obtain V0, that is the maximal theoretical speed, that is related to the last part of the sprint. And then we obtain maximal horizontal power, that is related to the ability of players to reach maximal speed. Using this scatter plot, we plot on the horizontal axis the maximal speed and on the vertical axis maximal acceleration. In this way, we are able to identify strengths and weaknesses of players during the sprint test, and this way we give information to the coaching staff to individualize also high-speed running drills. As you may imagine, we really believe scatter plots are very informative. In this case, we plot on the horizontal axis horizontal power obtained during the sprint test, while on the vertical axis we plot vertical power obtained during the counter movement jump. And these two qualities are two sides of the same coin. They are very strictly related one to the other. On the top right corner, we find players with high vertical and horizontal power, while on the opposite side, on the low left corner, we find players with low vertical and horizontal power, and we believe that with these players it is better to train strength before moving to power training. In this way, we are also able to identify hybrid situations. For example, player 12 and player 20 expressed a high level horizontal power with a quite low level of vertical power. With these players, our experience suggests that power training is very effective. Since their muscles are able to express power, it is only a matter of orientate power in all of the axes. The last test we perform is the peripheral neuromuscular fatigue test, which enables us to measure strength and muscular endurance. The peripheral neuromuscular fatigue test consists of 4 sets of changes of direction of 180 degrees at increasing intensity over an 8-meter course. The first 2 sets are at a quite low intensity. As you can see from the video, the player is performing the second set in this case, while the third, but mainly the fourth set, are at a high intensity. At the end of each set, we measure peripheral strength of knee extensor using a stimulation of the femoral nerve. So when the player finishes the set, sits on that chair that you can see from the video, we connect the cables and we deliver a single twitch shock to the femoral nerve. Player is completely passive, and after the shock, the knee extensor contracts and we measure peripheral strength. After that, player perform the third set or the fourth set of changes of direction. And we are able to measure peripheral strength of the left and right leg separately. With this test, we are able to create this graph. Each dot represents the force produced by the knee extensor after each set of changes of direction. After the two first sets, we have an increase in the force produced by the knee extensor because there is a potentiation effect, while after the third and the fourth set that are at high intensity, we have a decrease in the force produced by the knee extensor because of fatigue. So this test gives us information about strength, but also about the ability of players to sustain high-intensity neuromuscular exercise. So it gives us information about muscular endurance. Since we measure the force of the two legs separately, this test also gives us information about imbalances. The black line represents right leg, while the gray line in the graph represents the left leg. In this first example, we can see a balanced use of the limbs because we have similar strength and similar use because the two lines are parallel. In this second example, we can see an imbalanced use of the limbs because we have quite similar levels of strength as a mean, as an average, but a limited use of the right leg because there is no potentiation nor a fatigue effect. All the tests that our player perform enables us to create the player profile. So we use a radar chart where we plot z-score. Each dot represents the result in one of the tests I showed you. Since we use z-score, if the dot is far from the center, it means that the result in that test is very good. So in this example, we see that players have a very high level of intermittent running capacity, the blue dot, and counter movement jump test, the red dots. We also plot the black dotted line that represents the best results in that test for the player. So again, in this example, we see that for intermittent running capacity, it was the best result for that player, while for peripheral strength, for example, the result in that test is far from his best result. We also plot the blue line that represents reference values for the age group. So we have created reference values for each age group. As I mentioned earlier, we also want to obtain information about the long-term athlete development. So we use this graph to plot the changes in each test over time. In this example, we have a player that performed a lot of test sessions because he has been in our club for many years. In this way, we can see his physical fitness development and his changes during the season in order to optimize his training process. To summarize the physical qualities measured with all of our tests, we calculate a physical qualities index using a particular statistical analysis named principal component analysis. We plot this physical qualities index on the horizontal axis of this scatter plot, while on the vertical axis of this plot, we plot technical qualities obtained using a questionnaire done by the coaches. In this way, we are able to identify strengths and weaknesses of players, but it also helps us in the player selection process. Besides the physical fitness tests I showed you before, once a year we also perform functional and preventive tests. First of all, we measure lower limb dimensions, so we estimate the knee extensor cross-section area and we measure calf circumference. Then we measure adductor and abductor force using the squeeze test, and we also calculate the ratio between abductor and adductor force. Then we measure reactive capacity of players using the single leg drop jump tests, where we measure height of the jump, contact time, and reactive strength index. Lastly, we measure landing and jumping biomechanics using the single leg hop for distance tests, where we measure length of the jump, but also knee joint angles during pushing and landing phase using a video analysis. As I have already said, we perform these tests once a year, and we perform this test during the return to play process of severe injuries, and we define severe injuries if they keep the player out of the team for more than 30 days. Thanks everybody for listening.